I'm Paul, I'm chair of Cardiff Writers Circle, and what we're hoping to celebrate today without incident is the culmination of the celebrations for Cardiff Writers Circle's 75th anniversary. We managed to get a number of other writing groups to partake in the celebrations with us. So we're celebrating 75 years of creative writing in the city. The Circle was formed May the 4th, Star Wars Day, in 1947. And that's 25 years after the BBC, the same year as the foundation of India, modern state of, a year before Land Rover, and in 47, 3 books of note: All My Sons by Arthur Miller, Streetcar Named Desire by yes, Tennessee Williams, of course, and Diary of a Young Girl. Who wants to? Anne Frank, yes. So all quite different books, and one thing we're hoping to be showing you we can celebrate today is all the different types of writing that we can manage within Cardiff. We have Pip from Cardiff Uni Writers, we have Alex from Roth Writers, Jen is a member of ourselves but also of Tuesday Night Writers, that's correct, yes. Martin, Ruth and myself are all from Cardiff Writers Circle. If you want information about any of us, you can find out by asking us or by going to the Literature Wales site. Now, we want to not mess about with me talking all the time. I just want to say that we can have some questions and answers and also some readings. And the readings will generally be relatively short, but Matt over here is filming the event, and if Matt goes, it means there's a battery flick he has to do, so we'll probably have to interrupt a couple if that happens. But we're going to kick off now with a little bit of conversation about how this book came into being, how we came to celebrate the 75th anniversary with open mics, writers gathering at what was Jury's Inn, and we had a number of other events, a walking tour of Cardiff Centre, and what I'd like to do is please, although he's probably not expecting this, ask Martin to just say a few quick words about how you began the events, how you managed to achieve.
You're right, I wasn't expecting this. As Paul said, it sort of started off with us planning some form of celebratory event or series of events for our 75th anniversary in May last year. We soon realised that if we wanted to do anything substantive, it would cost money, and if we wanted to raise money to do it, the best way to do it was to make it much bigger than ourselves, to make it more of a community, a writers' community celebration, which is why we came up with the idea of broadening it out beyond our birthday and making it a celebration of 75 years of writing in Cardiff. So there's a fundraising scam, and we, as Paul said, we had we started off with a large, what we called a writers' gathering in a hotel in Cardiff, where we had, of course, 75 local writers, publishers, and speakers getting together, probably for the first time, because I think one of the, if you call it an issue, I think it is a bit of an issue with writers' groups, is that they work on their own largely, and there's no minimal cross-fertilisation of ideas if they're aware of each other at all, and we certainly came across quite a large number of groups which we were completely unaware of. They weren't sure if they'd heard of us either. So we worked with as many, 5 or 6 groups, as many of those groups as we could. So we started off with this writers gathering, which is an idea to get together and network and exchange ideas. And then from there we had a series of 10 creative writing workshops on Saturdays. As Paul said, we had a collaborative event with the Living Lines writing group and the A48 Theatre Company to do a walking tour based on our writing around the city centre. We've had a series of open mic events in the Flute and Tankard, organised by Jeff. Jeff's our real ale expert. The big sort of finish was this book, which was a sort of a year and a half in the planning. We had to work with publishers and funders to get this going. Contains 75 works, short stories and poems, and hugely varied, different genre, length, styles, writers from 5 different groups. And we had our launch in Waterstones early April, which went very well. And as they say, books are flying off the shelves, which is really very, very good. So this, and I think we've got Ruth, we've got about 2 other little post-launch promotional activities in the next few weeks and months, which should be good. And so, and these books, I think Paul mentioned, are, if anyone's interested, available for sale right here, right now. I would recommend you buy a copy because it's really good reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Okay, what I'd like to do is say, going to have some readings, and after each reading, if you wish, you can put questions to the reader, and then we'll have a generalized Q&A and some more readings. So, I would like to read you something. It's fairly short, and there's someone here who hasn't heard this yet and may decide that I'm in trouble, but we'll find out about that. So this is called She Said, I Said. No clues. The book I put all the markers in is at the bottom. So, can you hear okay? Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. She said, I said. Any day now. Right. Okay. She said there was something she wanted to do together. Couldn't do it alone. I said no, didn't fancy that. She said if I loved her I'd do it with her, for her. Said one of her friends and her partner did it. Would I prefer she found someone else to do it with? What about that thing she does with me because I like it, even though she hates it? I said all right. We could try it Saturday night. She loved it. I didn't. She insisted we'd do it again the following night. Loved it even more. I didn't. So every weekend she did the thing I liked, and I did the thing she liked. Twice. She told her friends what we did. They were jealous because their partners refused to do it with them, for them. She said I should encourage the other husbands, boyfriends, partners, significant others, wives, girlfriends to do the thing. I said that would sound very odd. How was I supposed to know their partners wanted that? It could get physical. Next time we were all together, she told everyone what I did with her, for her. The others laughed, but soon they were all doing it, had no choice. Well, I was doing it. So now we do this thing for her every weekend, even though she stopped doing the other thing for me. And twice every week together we watch Strictly, and I watch Doctor Who alone. No, that's
After
right.
that, will she be battering you and what?
More than likely, we'll need a new chair.
I just wanted to know how much was autobiographical and how much was invented.
Oh, all invented. What I'd like to do now is invite Ruth, please.
Can everyone hear me okay? The piece that I'm going to read is part of the collection that I'm writing at the moment, which is based on female figures in northern folklore who were in some way feared or reviled or outcast. So I was really interested in the trope of mermaids in northern folklore, and I wanted to do my own spin on it. So I wrote a horror story. So there's a slight trigger warning that comes with this, but it's just brief mentions. So I'm going to read a short extract. She knew she was swimming closer to the surface than would have been advised by the elders who went before her. It was late to be swimming south for the winter. She could not stop to rest for long where water meets air. The blood would freeze in her veins. But then who was left but her to heed the neuroses of her ancestors? They were all long lost to the deep. The lucky ones were released back into the energy of the waves centuries ago, their bones ground down until they were nothing but silt in the forgotten depths. Some of her ancestors had not been granted that mercy. Sea maidens had taken men for lovers for as long as men had dreams. Grandmother used to sing an old song that pronounced maidens and men to have similar hearts. The words, as her grandmother sang them, were long forgotten to her now, but she remembered the lesson. Though crews of men were cruel, many men did love, and though many maidens loved, many returned their cruelty. Miracles from the deep rescued men who surely would have drowned, and maidens stranded upon shores were returned to the safety of the waves. Maidens of the sea left their worlds behind to love men and mother their children, some by choice, others still due to the trickery and deceit of their captors. Millennia of distrust crept by, and still men gazed guilelessly across glittering oceans, oblivious to the generations of pain that roiled beneath the surface. Many's the maiden who lured a ship onto the rocks with her sweet song wailing on the winds of a storm. In their turn, men grew ever more cruel, hunting maidens under guise of sport and curiosity. Seeking sanctuary from men above the waves, maidens sought the safety of the dark in shoals. Grandmother sang that the old ones turned blind and spineless, their skin grey and slimy, somewhere along countless cursed eons of sightless scavenging for rotten flesh. They lost all reason. Now, a maiden could swim for thousands of miles of ocean without encountering another of her kind. Perhaps she never would again. Opposing the cautionary tales of the old ones, the sea maiden surfaced to examine her skin under the sun. Clear as glass, it laid bare tributaries of green and purple veins, betraying her vulnerability. Though the days were brief, they would lengthen the further south she travelled. She must take care. Many lifetimes ago, when she was a young maid of the sea, she was curious. Her grandmother warned her to stay in the dark and not to swim too close to the sun. But the few glimmering shafts of light that penetrated the depths were so magical. They danced a silent melody that was mysterious to her, yet seemed somehow familiar. When she confided in her grandmother how she longed for the light, her grandmother beat her with love and fear in her heart, with hope that her precious granddaughter might never long for the light again. Time passed by with no mark of night or day in the unchanging depths, until there came a time when grandmother went to sleep and would not wake up. And so, with nothing else to turn to, the young sea maiden swam towards the only thing of any difference in her world.
Thank you, Ruth. Thanks very much. Martin now is going to read us something.
This is a very short story, bit lighter. It's inspired by an unfortunate tale of a lady in France who was, although she was still alive, she was declared dead by a mischievous employee, and somehow officialdom sort of gradually took up that idea. And I think to this day, even though everyone knows she's alive, she's still struggling to prove that she's not dead. So this is I Am. I'm sorry, sir. I can't. What? Why not? There's money there. Yes, there's money, all right. Quite a lot, in fact. But the account's frozen. Steve Smith is dead. What do you mean he's dead? I'm sitting here, talking to you. I see you, sir, and we are having a conversation, but you are not the Steve Smith of 90 in the circus. You can't be. The system says he died 2 months ago. His estate is in probate, and his account frozen. Could you possibly be another Steve Smith? It's not exactly an unusual name. This is rubbish. Look at my driver's license. I am the Steve Smith. I live at this address. You've known me for 20 years. We used to play squash together. There's got to be a mistake. No, sir. The system never makes mistakes. Look, this is a copy of the grant of probate and a letter from the executors. If you were the Steve Smith, I would be talking to a dead man. And you, sir, are clearly alive. Just a minute. There's no death certificate in your file. You can't decide Steve Smith is dead without that. Yes, that is rather strange, sir, but the absence of a death certificate does not in itself prove that a person has not died. I'm sure Alfred the Great didn't have a death certificate. What? What's Alfred the Great got to do with it? He's dead, sir. No doubt about it. This is a nightmare. Last week my employer stopped my salary, despite me sitting in the office at the time. The week before, I had to prevent someone from fixing for sale signs outside my house. And now, I can't even withdraw money from my own bank account. How can I prove to you that I am Steve Smith, owner of that bank account, and all the money you're holding on to? I think you'll have to prove to the system that you didn't die. Okay. What's the procedure for doing that? There isn't one. Wait, let me guess. Because the system never makes mistakes. That's correct, sir. Right, that does it. Stick 'em up. Be careful with that gun, sir. You'll never get away with this. You're on CCTV. Your fingerprints everywhere. And I make a very good witness. That's where you're wrong. I can do anything I like. The police can't arrest a dead man, and he can't be prosecuted. Now, open the safe.
Thanks, Bartley. I'd like to have a few words now about writing groups and what people actually get from them. So, could I ask Ruth, please, and if it's okay, we'll walk along the row, just a few words on why you're in a group and what you think it means.
Yeah, so I guess part of my journey of joining Cardiff Writers Circle, it was when I moved to Cardiff about 4 years ago now. And I hadn't done any creative writing for many years. I went to art college and then a course afterwards, and creative writing was something I loved when I was very young, but it was something that got shelved. And so when I moved to Cardiff, I thought about what are the things that I really love to do and something that I would like to connect with people over, and what's something that's been missing from my life that I would like to build here. And so I went to a few different writers' circles. I went to Roth Writers, and I went to Cardiff Writers Circle, and also the Museum Writers, which I love all of those groups for the different ways that they explore writing. Writing in the moment at Roth Writers and responding to an exercise. And Museum Writers, it's great to respond to something from an exhibition. But I really like going away and, I guess like a typical introvert writer, working on something and then bringing it to the group and having that chance to get constructive feedback, which has just been so amazing to have that. So for a long time, that was something really positive that I got from the group. But I think last year, the workshops that were run for Cardiff 75 as well, there was just so much that I got from that on different topics. And yeah, it's just so great to have that opportunity through going to a writer's circle, to be able to access that and have our adjudications, get feedback from great writers and judges. And that's what I really value from it. Thank you.
So I joined Roth Writers a few years ago. It was the beginning of 2020, so lucky for me, all the sessions were online because of COVID, so I was able to do that. And the reason I started was because I'd just signed up to do the MA at Cardiff University, and I figured that it would be a good way to get back into the swing of things, because it had been a few years since my creative writing BA at Aberystwyth. I think what I got out of being in Roth Writers is just the exposure to other writers every other week, all the different kind of genres and styles that they write in, and just being in that kind of like positive group every month. It's just really inspiring, and to be around like other writers who are technically amateurs but they're so good, it's just almost makes you want to work harder and be on their level, especially when they're all so nice about it as well. And if it wasn't for being in Roth Writers, like I wouldn't be here now. You hear about so much going on in the community, even outside the group, that I would have had no clue about otherwise. So it's just good to be part of. It's a good way to get into the writing community, not just in the group, but in all of Cardiff.
I came to Cardiff for university, of course, and doing a English literature and creative writing Bachelor of Arts degree. It made a lot of sense to like join their Creative Writing Society, and so like I came to Cardiff as like a very anxious person, and I still am. But being in the society, being around like, because it's like the university group, a lot of people tend to be like the same age group. It's really nice to have like kind of like a group that makes you feel like very comfortable and welcomed. That makes it very kind of easy and natural to share work with, especially. And I think like just being around writers, just they have such kind of like an infectious energy, because a lot of people in the group tend to be fantasy or sci-fi writers. And as somebody who also writes a lot of fantasy, like hearing people share their work and also like just talk about their own little like fictional worlds, it like really helps to motivate me to write as well. So I think like kind of like the confidence or like resilience to get criticism, and also like kind of all of the doors it's opened. I think that's sort of like been the really important bits that I've gotten from being in a writing group.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Pip. And Martin.
Yes, I'm relatively new to creative writing, and I've been a member of Cardiff Writers Circle for probably about 7 years or so. And at school, I used to enjoy writing stories and being creative in that way. But after I left, life got in the way, really, work and family and this, that and the other. And then in more recent years, I joined a public speaking group, and I was with that for a number of years, and I found that the process of actually writing speeches and crafting them, I found I was getting more into sort of storytelling, and it lit a little spark in me. So 7 or so years ago, I joined Cardiff Writers Circle. And I find that it's a really sort of safe and supportive environment to experiment with poetry and stories and other works. I find it's great to sort of listen to other perspectives on writers. And during this last year, 18 months, the workshops you've organised, the cross-fertilisation of ideas and personalities and experiences from people from all sorts of backgrounds has been really useful to me and very stimulating.
Thank you, Martin. Jen.
Hi, yeah, I think for me, the thing about a writing group is for the motivation and kind of pushing you on. I'd written sort of from as long as I can remember, but I'd always sort of been there on my own and not known other people that did it, so you never really say much about it. And then eventually I took a year out from work and I did a master's in script writing, and it was after that I found out about Tuesday night writes. So I went along. The first time I went to a meeting, I was having a chat with kind of like the people there, and suddenly you just felt that your face fits and you sort of like find my tribe. And so I went on with that, and there were people there who had some success, which is really motivating. And then a few years after that, I joined Cardiff Writers Circle. Tuesday Night Writes is predominantly a script writing group, and I was going on to novels. And really, since then, I've written 2 novels. I've got an agent now. We're just polishing up my novel for her to submit. And I don't think I ever would have done that without being in writers' groups and knowing people that you can chat to about it and getting the feedback, and just really pushing you on to carry on and do as much as you can.
Thank you, Jen. I think there's a good point Jen made there, that we're in writing groups basically because we want to write and we want to improve what we're doing. And one way you can demonstrate that you've improved is by getting some of your work published. Jen and another member, I can't mention because she's under embargo at the moment, she's been accepted by an agent, she's got a publisher, and hopes her book will be out early next year, and they've also signed a US deal with her. She's told me lots of nasty things will happen if I mention any more details. And we have a few writers in the past who've published multiple books, and we have a number of people who are published in, shall we say, poetry magazines or on sites, and who write essays and things, people who write any number of things. Whatever you want to write, being in a writing group means you get feedback and can therefore improve your writing. We aim to make everybody the best writer they can possibly be, help them all we can. Are there any questions? Because we'd like to open this up so that anyone has a question, you can just throw it out. Well, apart from my dear wife wanting me out of the house, I was no longer gainfully employed, and I'd been in writing group. When we were in Spain, I was in a writing group there, English language writing, and I found Cardiff Writers, came along, and young Steve was chair at the time, and I liked it. As Jen said, I found my face fit, and I liked what happened. You know, I read something out and they'd all go and tell me how to improve it, which sometimes involved matches in petrol. But Steve then said there was a whole new world opening up in front of me, and why didn't I stand to be chair? And then he was gone out the door. But no, he's back, and Steve is himself an excellent writer. Bruce is published, I believe. Is it okay for me to say?
Sure.
Bruce writes, shall I say, reviews and reports of events, but things that happen in his life. And he publishes them on a poetry site. He's the only factual writer on that poetry site, mainly because they won't let him write poetry. But he, how many of these
I've been
have you
doing
had?
it for 25 years, every month.
25 years every month he's had something published on that site. That's phenomenal. And you may guess, Bruce is not from Canton.
Oh, I gave that away, did I?
He's from the posh side of New York, but we're really pleased to have him with us. So I joined to write, and I've had things published in our collections. There are 2 now, and I've had some published in other collections, and I'm hoping to be, as with Jen and another person, pushing an agent to take me on sometime this year for a couple of things. But we'll find out about that. Any more questions, please? Steve?
I wondered if I could ask, because obviously everybody on the panel has got a certain amount of experience in writing. If an absolutely brand new writer came to you, very enthusiastic but no experience, is there one piece of advice that you would offer them, the most important single piece of advice that you think has helped you as a writer, or has formed you as a writer, or is forming you as a writer?
Anybody?
I don't always practice what I preach, but I think it's to read as much as you can and to write, even if it's a little, on a regular basis. I guess those 2 things.
It was one of my module teachers that told me that, but it was something I thought was very important. But she told me that you should always write rubbish, because the thing about writing rubbish or absolutely anything at all is that you can come back and edit it later. So even if you think what you're writing is terrible, you should just write, and you should write as much as you like, because you can always come back to it later.
Yes, that's very true. You can't edit a blank page, but you can edit rubbish into something more substantial.
Yeah, I just say sort of similar to Pip, just write and keep writing, and most of all, don't be disheartened if your first attempts aren't brilliant, because you put your heart and soul into it, and if it's not fantastic, it can be disheartening, but just keep going and persevere.
Pass that down to you.
I guess my one is a little bit of a cliche, really, but people say show, don't tell, but I think it's kind of writing from that experiential viewpoint, that you're describing sensation, the experience of that journey within the story. And when I write, I kind of try and write from that viewpoint and think about how I can bring in all of the different senses. Yeah.
Can I take, on that basis, how do you believe being in the writing group has helped you hone that?
I think there's lots of times when I've read stuff out and it's been told either there's maybe a little bit too much of that, too much detail, or where people can point out, oh, you're telling something there when you could show it. And sometimes I think as a writer, when you write something, it takes a lot of time to put something away and have enough distance from it to be able to do that kind of editing yourself, but you can get that feedback straight away in a writing group from a a huge amount of people who all have different experiences and different ways of writing, so that's really valuable.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add so that I'm contributing, even though everybody took all the good points already. But yeah, just my advice for a first-time writer would be to just keep going. And yeah, like Pep mentioned, even if you're writing something that is terrible, there might be one good line in there, and you can save that great line for something else. So just keep doing it.
Thanks, Alex. I think it was Hemingway said, the art of writing is applying the seat of your pants to the chair in front of your typewriter. Of course, not many of us use those these days. Well, I've got an electric one now. So, any more questions, please? Anything? No? Gosh. Oh, yes.
Do you think a writer needs joined up writing, memory, an ability to join things together, or is it a writer needs to be sort of disjointed? Because I find that the best way to do things. Disjointed, yeah.
Do you mean you just write something that's come to you?
Yes.
And then maybe something else? And,
That's right.
yeah?
And then link them together if you can. Yeah.
Well, as Alex said, if you just write and you go back to it and you think this isn't much call, but you keep one line from it, that's an achievement. And if you have another line from somewhere else, you can put them together. So it's really whatever works for you. Some people take a very regimented approach to it. You know, people like Hemingway, for example, he always used to sit and say, I'm going to write X thousand words today. You know?
Well, I think a good writer has to be a lateral thinker.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you just put down what everyone else is thinking. So you've got to be thinking something different. And then you make something new.
Yeah. That's fine.
I want you to quote a compatriot,
Go for
Benjamin
it.
Franklin. I came across this quote in the bookstore in Philadelphia, the University of Pennsylvania bookstore. They have it on the wall. Either write something worth reading or do something worth writing.
That's good. Ben Franklin. Man with the key on the off the kite. Yes. Apparently that story's been exaggerated about Ben Franklin, and he wasn't simply standing directly under the lightning or anything. But anyway, he survived. Okay, I think we'll go on with some more readings. So, Jen, are you able to?
Okay, this is part of a short story called Terrible Weather for June. It has no particular backstory other than a rainy June. June. Terrible weather for June, he said, shuffling his feet and glancing at the girl, then back at his feet. June who? She said. June, the month June, he replied. Oh, yes, of course, how silly of me. They stood in the drizzle for a moment, then she said, my mother's roses have been completely drenched. How awful, he replied, but he didn't know much about roses, so he said nothing else. The sky drizzled down on them and the cars splashed past. The bus came and they both got on and went to work. July. Dreadful business about the rainforest, she said, hoping he'd heard about the rainforests. The rainforests? Oh yes, dreadful. Terrible state of affairs, he said, tucking his book about roses under his arm. Most disturbing. Would you like an extra strong mint? Thank you. They sipped their extra strong mints and a breeze blew across them. The bus came and they both got on and went to work. August. Are you going on holiday soon? He asked. Yes, I'm going to Blackpool in a week for a fortnight, she smiled. And you? I'm going to Skegness in a fortnight for a week. How nice. They both laughed. I hope the weather's good for you. Skegness can be so bracing. Yes, that's what the brochure said. They both laughed again. The sun shone down on them and cars whizzed past. The bus came and they both got on and went to work. September. Did you have a nice holiday? She inquired. Very nice, thank you. Very relaxing. And you? Oh, lovely, thank you. Lovely weather. The weather makes all the difference, I always think. Oh, I think so too. All the difference. They both watched the clouds as the clouds floated past. Then the bus came and they both got on and went to work.
Thank you, Jen. Can I just ask, what was the inspiration for that?
It was really just a rainy June. Kept hearing the phrase "terrible weather for June," and just suddenly the bus stop in the village I used to live in came to mind, and two people standing there that can't quite get a conversation going.
Just okay. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll go with Pip now and then Alex. And what do you have for us, Pip?
My piece is called A Moonlit Letter. Every night I see you, my moon, up there in the void sky for infinite sisters, all identical, but I know you are mine. Nobody could mistake your radiance, a candle flame guiding me to my true purpose. You make it hard to reach you. I know this, my moon, this desolate expanse that divides us, air too thin and winds too mighty for me to fly through. But this distance is what makes my craving grow. Perhaps you think me a fool, but I know what these games you play. You are testing me, see if I will give up and fly on. You send me false prophets, dazzling, flickering idols that singe my antenna and burn my wings. In that moment, how real they seem, capturing a glimmer of your sweet, honeyed radiance. I will admit, I have been fooled once or twice. Keeping secrets from you benefits no one under your brilliant gaze. For those times I have been burned, I know you have designed it so, my moon, to punish me for my infidelity. Who am I to share that sacred dance, the secrets of proximity with another, but one we have reserved for each other, when you finally grant me our fated meeting? An utter fool, that is what I am, and each new burn that scorns my scales I know is rightfully deserved for my insolence. That is to speak nothing of the Goliaths you send, my moon. They chase me down with hammers of plastic, trying to crush me against the walls, hell-bent on my early destruction. I have seen the shadows of my brethren, mangled, dust-coloured halos, and once even saw the act in action. Such a narrow escape I made. As tragic as it is, they are the failures, a grim reminder of what will await me if my devotion ever wavers. But I'm different. I'm strong. You sent these Goliaths to train me, push me to my physical pinnacle, and I have been pushed. It will not suit you to allow someone so weak and pitiful to join your side. So, I pray you hear my cries, my moon, for despite how beautiful you are, in all your morning dew glory, I can only bear to admire you from such a distance for so long, until my heart aches. But I cannot be so greedy, my moon, for you always preferred the humble. Forever waiting, your moth.
Thank you, Pip. Can I ask you if there was a particular inspiration for that?
I mean, I've always been a fan of insects, but I think the inspiration for the piece was, I think I was thinking about kind of like putting my work out more, so I stumbled upon like the website Reddit and the subreddit r/writers, and I think they had weekly competitions where they would put out a word and they would have people like write stories about them as a competition. And I think the word for that week was zealous. And I never ended up submitting the piece for it, but I sort of like heard the word zealous and was thinking about kind of like religious like zealotry. And for some reason I thought about like the idea of like a moth and kind of like having this like zealous like obsession with the moon, who the moon is like a symbol I tend to use a lot in my writing, because I often see like the moon as kind of like a goddess, so I like the ethereal femininity associated with it, so that's kind of how the piece came about.
Thank you. Across to Alex.
Thank you, Pip. Okay, my piece is called Is This a Conflagration?
Might be a screen or something.
Is it a match behind that glint in your eye? The first spark hinting combustion? Or just a trick of the light? A trick of the lie I'm telling myself? Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Is it the wine? Why your white cheeks glow with that rosé flush? Why your top teeth go to test your bottom lip? Are you staring why I'm staring? Are you a bonfire in midwinter to be watched from the forest's edge, where only the faintest breath of heat can reach my parted lips? Am I the charcoal and the kindling edging towards an open flame? Or are you pausing while I'm pausing?
Again, Alex, was that inspired by anything in particular?
The initial inspiration for that was when I misunderstood somebody when they were talking about matches, and I thought they were talking about when you match with somebody on Tinder, but actually they were talking about a match you use to light something. And I just find it so funny when miscommunications like that happen. And so that's where the initial line came from, and then the rest of it is inspired by those first few moments when you just start dating someone and you're not sure whether there's something there or if it's just all in your head. Yeah.
Thanks, Alex. Any questions?
What do you think is the importance of reading your poetry aloud and reading your writing aloud? Because Cardiff 75 has this lovely book, and here we all are performing. Do you think it's an important thing to hear the work aloud?
I firmly believe that some poetry is better read and some is better performed. Leslie, as you'll find out shortly, is an excellent performer. When it comes to short stories, Zorn, a lot depends on the impact you can engender. I do think there's a different experience when you hear the author reading something. You say, oh, that's how it's supposed to be. Anyone? Yeah.
I think even with sort of like novel writing and short stories, which aren't sort of as an inherently lyrical form or some like sound-based form as poetry, I think it can still often be very important and useful to read your work aloud, because it becomes much easier to hear like if you've sort of like made a mistake, added in the wrong word, and sometimes like you can only know if sort of like a sentences flow together really well if you read them out loud.
Yes. Thanks.
I agree with Pip. In fact, I'd say that I understand more about my own work if I read it out aloud, even if it's only myself. I understand it more, I think.
Yeah, if I'm being completely honest, I'm not mad about reading my own work aloud. At Tuesday Night Writes, we read each other's work, and that's really interesting for seeing what somebody else makes of it. And obviously, if you've not written something right, they don't read it how you imagine it. So that's really helpful. But as far as reading my own work aloud, when we're at the workshops at Cardiff Writers Circle, it is really useful, because when you finish, the reaction you get straight away is probably one of the most useful bits of feedback you get. Sometimes everybody has something to say, you know you've done something right, and sometimes it's quiet for a minute and you think, oh, that didn't quite hit the mark. So yeah, I think for the reactions and for the way other people read it, sometimes it's really important for developing it.
Thanks. Alex?
Yeah, just to add to what Pip said, I find that reading something I've written out loud to myself just helps me imagine or kind of get a sense of how someone else is going to read it, and kind of also to take a step back and get a bit of perspective of what I've actually written. So it's definitely a good exercise, and as well, you never know when someone's just going to ask you to read out what you've read, so it's always good practice.
Yeah, I feel like for me there's kind of like two aspects to it. There's the reading out at a circle context and getting that feedback and having that opportunity to, I guess when I write I would speak out loud to myself to hear how the rhythm sounds, but then when you speak in front of other people it also feels very different. But then there's the performance context and just having that opportunity to share something that you've crafted and kind of laboured over, a labour of love with other people, and yeah, that feels really special.
Thanks. Okay, any more questions, please? Okay, what? Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I become very happy because Bib and you are a student, yeah? So could you let us please know how is there any connection between CWC and the universities and the college in Cardiff? How you encourage the student to become like member with CWC? Right. Is there any small fees for them as well?
Well, Cardiff Writers Circle itself doesn't have links to any of the universities, so we've had a number of students who've come to us. But Pip, how does Cardiff Uni Writing Group, should we say, publicise itself to other students?
So like we publicise ourselves like other students, as most other societies have. We have like an Instagram page, and we promote ourselves on like the student union website. We also have like a Discord server that tends to be like our main kind of space for like kind of socialising, because it's like kind of like nice, and it's been more like private, and so like it's a good, if people are able to like submit kind of like writing electronically, so even if they're not like kind of as confident to like speak it out loud at like one of the socials or the workshops, they can like submit it to like one of the servers, and people so like in their own time can look at the writing and give feedback. Sometimes people will like write their work on like Google Docs, and people can like comment like right on the document, or like they'll just sort of like make their comments to them like in the server. So those are kind of like the main ways to kind of like publicise ourselves to the students of Cardiff University.
Thanks very much. Generally speaking, we do rely a lot on people looking for writing groups. It's very difficult to, as it were, publicise yourself otherwise. You know, we have a website, Twitter account, so on, all these things, as do practically all the writing groups, but especially over the last few years, life's been very interesting, and a lot of other groups have gone by the wayside, but the ones that haven't are now, I would say, picking up quite well. Yeah. So there's nothing much I can say really about students.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Alex.
Yeah, just on that point, one of the funny things is that a lot of the people you meet in one writers group have been part of another writers group. So, for example, the head or the chair of both writers is Christina Thatcher, who is a professor at Cardiff University and has been a professor elsewhere. And even though I was a student at Cardiff, that was before Christina joined there. So I joined both writers, met Christina, and then she was a professor there, and then she told me about the Cardiff Writers Circle, and all of this was after I'd been to the Cardiff University's own Great Writing Social. So they kind of, once you join one writers group, all the others kind of get some tertiary publicising as well. So.
Thanks very much. Thanks. What I'd like to do now is invite some people from the floor to speak, beginning with Leslie. Leslie, or do you? All right. And then after Leslie, we'll have Jeff.
I don't know whether... Do I need this? Do I need that? No. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Say ABC and you'll find out.
So, I'm very proud to have 4 pieces in the book, and I'm going to read 2 of them to you now. I suppose I should give a content warning. Alcohol. Martinis. Dry martinis are not a vice. They're essential. Like marrying, one of those conditions we consider biologically necessary for life. A whiff of extra dry martini, never Dolan, 4 parts gin, a deftly cut sliver of lemon zest, its oil spritzed like petrol on puddles. And that's what it looks like. Thank you. And the second one is about my partner who creates the martinis. It's called Kitchen Drinks Slinger. He knows the etymology of grenadine. The Japanese Jack Rose unfolds like Guerlain perfume or a transformer. Others, brown, thuggish, thump the tongue in absinthe whiskyness. You need 2 hands for the glass. Spreadsheets map the stocks of tinctures in the linen fold oak cupboard that once held a television. He knows the etymology of falernum. He is the real maraschino.
Thank you, Leslie. Jeff.
Yes, sure. Right, thank you. Right, I think what everyone said about the author actually reading their own poems, and I think it's vital that they do, because people will hear then the intonations and where the writer, or what the writer actually meant by his poem. This one is called When the Daisies Go to Sleep. I wrote this for my 3-year-old granddaughter, and she is gorgeous. When the daisies go to sleep, I will be there for you forever. Whenever you need me, my darling girl, you are the loveliest little person. I feel so privileged to be your granddad, and honoured that you hug me so tightly, as you slip into slumber's embrace, at that time of the evening, when the daisies go to sleep. You run like the wind through the meadow of my garden, so happy, so free, laughing all the while. Such a joy to be with you, my darling girl. My heart is yours, you melt it with your smile. Time when your busy day is over, tiredness and weariness have come, exactly at the time of the evening when the daisies go to sleep.
Thank you, Jeff. That's lovely. Jane, you're okay now.
Yeah.
And then after Jane, you'll have Steve.
This is a bit of flash fiction. It started out as twice as long and I cut it. Good practice editing for me, to half its size for a competition. And it was inspired by an exhibition. You'll realise whose exhibition at the end. He worked feverishly. There was a mood at night which inspired him, and he was enraptured in the silence. Well before sunrise it was complete. His wild energy had been captured magnificently. Theo, his brother, arrived with bread and cheese, and he ate ravenously. The depth of the new work stopped speech. They walked in the early morning light, Theo still awed by the painting. The starry night had been recorded by Vincent for posterity.
Steve, I'll stand over here perhaps, and then I can see everybody. Can't hear you. Anyway. Hello. I'm just going to read the first 400 words of the 2,000 word short story. Small little intro. A year or two ago I wrote a novella about a young school teacher who and one of her pupils who fell in love with each other. A lot of people read that and were very kind about it, but quite a few people said, what happened to them afterwards? What happened to the pair of them at the end of the story? So this anthology was an opportunity to partly answer that. This story actually takes place 10 years after the original one. So at this point, Alice, who's the former school teacher, is now 33, and her ex-pupil, Lewis, is 25. It's called, the story is called Ithaca. Lunchtime, and the restaurant was crowded, the waiter apologetic. Sorry, monsieur, there is only this table. Just my luck. I'd be a finger smear away from 4 kids. The nearest already with mayo-daubed chin, tearing apart a longestine. And I was wearing brand new cream-coloured chinos. The father, built like a rugby forward, spread his hands apologetically. Huge hands with ragged nails. We must be your worst nightmare. That's no problem, I lied, and smiled as I lied. I ordered the Dorade and Vin Blanc and opened my book. But Homer seemed for the moment less compelling than my neighbours. Mayo Chops had inherited his father's curly black hair, the older girl the deep corn-coloured locks of the mother. The youngest two were also a boy-girl black-blonde combo, and all were sucking and slurping from the 2-tiered plateau de fruits de mer. I watched the mother slide an oyster into her braised mouth and, eyes half closed, swallow slowly, sensuously. A bright, direct voice broke my reverie. Do you think my mummy is pretty? The elder girl regarded me expectantly. Her mother intervened. Zoe, that's rude. Apologise to the gentleman. But Zoe was not to be quelled. All right, I'm sorry, but I asked nicely. And he was looking at you. The waiter served my fish and wine. Before filleting the Dorade, I admitted that your daughter was quite right. I was admiring you, all of you, enjoying your fruits de mer. I might have added that I didn't think the mother was pretty. She undoubtedly had been pretty. How could she not have been, with that heart-shaped face, riot of blonde hair and those bluer than blue eyes? But a trace of something, gravitas, experience, in the set of her lips, the line of her jaw, had taken her beyond pretty. She was perhaps beautiful. Now she asked, are you on holiday? I temporised. Oh, just a few days. I don't like being away too long. The father, expertly extracting lobster claw meat, asked, away from what? Or who? Whom, I corrected him silently, before replying, oh, normal stuff, you know, home, work, nothing complicated. Strangers weren't entitled to know that I was on holiday only because my mother had passed away recently. The woman had a teenager's pretty laugh. We've usually found complicated is good. Mayo Chops jerked a bouleau from its shell and liquid speckled the cover of my book.
Mae hwn yn gyhoeddiad diogelwch. Gofynnir yn garedig i chi beidio gadael bagiau neu eiddo personol heb oruchwyliaeth. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
This is a security announcement. Please do not leave bags or personal belongings unattended. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayo Chops jerked a bouleau from its shell and liquid speckled the cover of my book. Flapping a defensive napkin, I returned the mother's question. Are you on holiday? Oh, God no. Where would we be on holiday from? I shook my head. Is that what you mean by complicated? The husband shrugged. It's pretty simple. We're wayfarers, wanderers across the face of the earth. Oh, you mean like hippies? The woman wagged her blonde head. Not at all like hippies. We're nomads. Lewis builds dry stone walls. We go wherever the work is. He's been renewing the terraces in some local vineyards. Really? Where do you learn that? College? Lewis raised an eyebrow and laughed. College? No chance. I didn't even make it as far as GCSEs. A glance arced between the couple. The force field binding them was suddenly, fiercely, insistent as an electric shock. And then those blue eyes turned towards me. And we'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Steve. What we'll do now is have Pam, please, and then Young Master again.
Okay. I think I'll stand over there with Steve on that. This is a piece of flash fiction, which is something I wrote last year to commemorate the 75 years of Cardiff Writing Circle. And as you can imagine, because it's flash fiction, it's just got 75 words in it. Alex, you mentioned something about Tinder, so this just might resonate with you, perhaps, maybe not. It's called Unlocked Love. Monica swore as she scrambled on her hands and knees, looking for her spare key. Locking herself out on a bitter, dark night, and another unsuccessful attempt at speed dating increased her frustration. Then her mobile died, leaving her without a torch. Her shrill expletives shrouded despair. Can I help you? Monica gawked at the good-looking man bending over her. The strong light of his mobile illuminated his smiling face. Oh, yes, please, she murmured.
I just want to point out, by the way, that Pam is a member of another writing group as well as the Circle, which is Living Lines, who cooperated along with us on the walking tour, and they also have the A48 Theatre Company. And Pam writes a lot of stuff about, in particular, Hayes Cemetery.
Well, dead people, basically.
Yeah, dead people. Pam doesn't see dead people, she writes them. So, Ian, are you available, sir?
Need the mics for.
Thank you. Stand here.
Yes.
Okay, this is called Unnecessary Necessary. An unnecessary, necessary slab of torment and comfort, making me feel guilty for the time I spend with her. Should I be feeling this way, I ask. Yes, she says. She knows the answer to everything. Being smart, I suppose she would. Black and bruised, cracked and hacked, indented in my life, hands and jeans. I feel lost without her, shackled, yet free to leave whenever I want. How did I ever manage to live? How did I ever manage without her, especially in my teens? The keeper of all my memories and witness to private chat. There used to be a silence between us, but now she can talk back. Just to me, I hope. Although I hear spies can listen in. As long as it's not my mother, then I don't really care, I think. A friend and a foe, an enemy of my time and a tunnel of escape. The demon who trolls through my input and shows me lands far and warm. She knows it's wet and cold outside. She's seductive and clever, always on my side. She's a part of my body now, my hands, face and ears. A bit haggard and aged, a phone battling to keep its head high. The time has come and gone, been replaced and outsmarted. A new one I should buy. My relationship is one that, if for one moment I think I have lost her forever, I panic and I get sad. That's how much she means to me. Yet I loathe her for making me feel so needy and bad. I dropped her once and spread the already webbed cracked screen. On my laptop I searched for new models. I'm not so stupid as to use my phone. She would break her motherboard heart and would purposely wipe her memory of me and that of her own. She could live without me, but not me without her. We get along fine, and if I did not have one, I would be frowned upon by society. I would end up having just real friends and not know the time of day. I would book zero-rated hotels, and for train tickets too much I'd pay. I'd miss my birthday and that of others. I would not know how many times I'm being liked. I would not know if I should be building a nuclear fallout shelter. Okay, yes, I admit it. I love my phone, and most importantly, I can use it to see if I've spinach on my teeth or a boogie on my nose.
Thank you, Ian. Thanks. That's all the readings of people here, but there was one person who was going to be here today but couldn't because she had a little accident at home and she's unable to come. So what I'd like to do is just read a poem by Angela Edwards. This is called Daffodils. She doesn't put wandered lonely as a cloud anywhere in it, I can assure you. Angled at the ceiling, trumpet mouths shout at me of cold fields in rows, the unravelling of bulbs to green points for a single purpose. Cut to travel as buds, in elastic bands and priced in the supermarket box, we met for £1. Here they expand and burst to a sun's corona, beyond the battering of bees shouting at me with trumpet mouths that they've made it. Thank you. Does anybody have any more questions? Pat?
I would just like to ask if you've got a good idea to write either a poem or a short story or even a novel, and then somebody in your group has come up with a similar idea, does it put you off?
Who would like to start that?
Yes. But then I just do it anyway. Because it will just never be the same. And it might be similar, but it'll be different because you're different and you write differently. And even if it turns out, that there's a strong likeness between the two of them, it'll just have your own spin on it. And like I said earlier, if it turns out that it's too much of the same as what they've done, you might still have one or two lines you can salvage from it. So if there's something I want to write about, or something you want to write about, you should just write about it, because you will always be better off, even if you don't end up using it.
Yeah, I think for me, I feel like it also differs depending on the type of writing. So if it was a novel, I feel like I would be more put off than something like a poem. But yeah, I agree with what Alex says, that two people are going to write the same thing, and definitely if there's something that you're inspired to write, that you want to put the time into maybe researching, and that really kind of sparks your curiosity that you want to write about, it's always good to go with that gut feeling.
I think plagiarism is always that kind of deep dark fear in the back of every writer's mind. and like it can be off-putting when somebody has a similar idea, because you don't want to like overstep any boundaries. But I think, as everybody else has said, every writer has their own style and they have their own backgrounds, and they'll all have like different contexts that they're working from. So I feel like even if two pieces of work have very similar premises, they will always fundamentally end up being very different.
Yeah, I think, and Stephen might know this better than I, but I think there are only supposed to be a certain limited number of stories in the world. I can't remember if it's 6 or 7 or thereabouts. So inevitably we're going to come across similar themes, similar plot lines, but as the others have just said, we just write with our own voices, you use our own angles, our own languages, and yeah, no, I don't see a problem with that.
Yeah, so far I don't think it's happened where someone has said something and I thought, oh no, it's mine. But yeah, I don't think it would put me off, because as the others have said, it would turn out completely different. And if it was something as long as a novel, I'd just get my head down and try and get mine finished first.
Ian.
Panel as well, what their thoughts are on AI. And how that's what you think is going to happen there, and is it affecting anything at the moment?
Right. Does anybody have any specific thoughts on AI?
Yeah, AI is the big topic with writers at the moment. I think it is sort of like a big fear at the moment, and I guess I would be lying if I said I wasn't worried about it, especially because I think you see like the writers' strikes in America currently, where like they're kind of wanting to like replace like people's hard work with AI because it's just cheaper and they can get the kind of stuff done a lot quicker, which I think is like really sad to see kind of like the arts be put sort of like on the sidelines nowadays, especially like as me being like only 20 years old and sort of like eventually gonna go into like the job market, kind of, you know, will they take over jobs? But I feel like my take on it is I feel like AI can be interesting, it can be useful, but I think the issue currently is that there's a lack of regulation and a lack of knowledge and awareness about AI, and I feel like if there's like proper regulations on AI, it can kind of help to sort of like minimise the impact that it will have on writers.
Anybody?
Yeah, I kind of feel like the whole debate around it brings up some questions around, you know, because AI is generated from other writing and collecting lots of writing together. How can you be an original writer, and how can you create something that's not formulaic, which is a funny question for me because all of my short stories at the moment are based on folklore, so they're based on templates. But what can you do with your writing that is something that someone hasn't done before, or is your unique voice, and how can you draw readers to you because they appreciate your voice and the way that you write? And I think that's brought that question more to the forefront, and it'll be interesting to see what writers do with that, I think.
To be honest, I think it's absolutely terrifying, because to write knowing that there's never any guarantee that you'll have any success is one thing, but to write knowing that there's absolutely no chance of it being published or sold or what have you, because it's all done by AI these days, is a very different thing indeed. But then on the other side of the coin, as Ruth was saying, it's all done from work that's been done before, and presumably if it kind of goes much further, there will have to be regulations, so people would have to be made aware that this has been written by AI. And hopefully, I don't know how much appetite there would be really for people to watch hours and hours of read books and books and books full of stuff that is just basically a computer program, and how inspiring or original those works are going to be. So yeah, I think it's terrifying, but fingers crossed it won't really take off.
Yes, Steve.
Yeah, could I just add to that? Obviously, we don't know where AI is going to go. Some of the more nightmarish scenarios may or may not come true. But speaking as somebody who's absolutely obsessed with writing, but has virtually no interest in going into print, in being published, and I don't think I'm particularly unusual in this, and certainly I think in realistic terms, the chances of anybody making, you know, significant income out of their writing alone is pretty slender. From that point of view, from the point of view of those people, and I think there are, you know, many of us who write. I don't want to put it in extreme terms. I write because we have to, but we write because we want to. And that will continue. I mean, AI can do whatever it wants to do in the commercial world, but you know, there will be many people in many writers' circles, like I would suspect and hope people around here, who will continue writing whatever AI does.
Wise words. Yeah.
Hopeful.
Yes, does anyone else have any points to raise or questions? Alex?
How do you counteract the effects of, I guess, creative thought block?
Writer's block. Well, for my part, I find if I'm going to the writing circle and I want to read something, but I haven't written anything, that itself is a spur. I know some groups have an item you have to write something about. I mentioned before the museum writers. There'll be an article, an artifact, painting, whatever, and you have to write about that. And there are other things such as particular courses or groups where there is, as with both, for example, Christina leads the group, doesn't she? Whereas what we tend to do is more have people bring their work to us to discuss. And it's an interesting one, though. It's very easy to get into a situation where you're not actually doing anything. Pitt mentioned earlier, I think it's another Hemingway quote that she gave about just write. Let your pen and paper, your fingers and keyboard, your thumbs and phone, your quills and vellum, whatever you use, just write. And you may find that you come up with something, but you can't edit a blank page, which is the scenario you're talking about. So from my point, I would say just write. Does anybody have anything else?
Kind of just further to that, if anyone's familiar with like automatic writing where you just write whatever comes to mind, I find that's helpful for writer's block. Most of the time when I start writing anything, the first sentence is literally word for word, blah 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 blah, and I find that just helps get the ball rolling. The hardest part is actually sitting down to do it, devoting the time to do it, but once you start writing, I find especially pen and paper is good for writer's block as well, then it helps.
Do any? Oh, sorry. Carry on. No, I was just going to say, any of the other writers here have anything to add to that?
I'm having that problem right now. I've got a deadline in front of me and I don't have an idea yet. But other than that, I write letters, which help. Like he said, if you just write crap, by the 4th or 5th paragraph, you begin to hit on something and then you just eliminate everything that came before it. And the other thing is I have chores I set aside that I really dislike. I do them if I'm not writing. And you'd be surprised how in the middle of washing dishes you have an idea.
Yeah.
Leslie?
The other thing I'll say is do something you love. Go for a walk. Look at things that are inspiring to you or just things that give you pleasure. and that can usually trigger an idea. So just go out, get out, do something you like doing, and that usually clears your mind.
I should also add walks are fantastic, long walks, especially for depression.
Yeah, indeed it does. And of course, going for a coffee in a cafe, and you can watch people, or go and listen to the birds. There's a lot of them about at the moment. Ruth.
Yeah, I think because everyone's different, there's as many ways of working through it as there are people, and I think it's something that, you know, you read about some writers who have a very structured or rigid or regimented way of working, and they'll put a time in the calendar and they say sit down and write at this time every day or every week, and I just can't work a schedule like that, and I feel like it's always like shifting sand underneath me, trying to figure out what's the next way to get back into the writing if I go into a bit of a lull with it. And yeah, for me it's trying all different things, so yeah, taking some time away from it, going on a trip, and being inspired, or sometimes it is just saying that's my hour, I'm writing tomorrow, and it doesn't matter if it's not any good. Yeah, so for me, I think to keep myself interested, I have to change it all the time, which I don't think is the most efficient, but I haven't hit on it yet for myself.
Thanks, Ruth. Anybody have anything else for us?
I don't think I ever will hit on it. I write in every genre, depending on how I feel when I get up in the morning. I don't have any great structure to my plan for it. Yes, there are plans for certain pieces once they develop, but movement's incredibly important. I worked with a musician a few years ago, and most of her music for the production we did came from her walking, and she would literally walk through town, do her shopping, stop on a street corner and put the melody in her head onto the phone. So there's no one way of doing it, it's just finding the way today that works, I think. I don't do structure.
I actually found recently that I always used to feel I would have to sit down and work at the laptop or write, but I've actually started going to the park and writing on my phone, which sounds like a really awkward way to do it, but it just means that I don't have an excuse. I can write anywhere.
You can write anywhere.
So that works for me, actually.
Hi, I'm a doctoral researcher from Cardiff Metropolitan University. At the moment, I'm writing PhD thesis. However, I'm a creative designer, so creative writing is in my subconscious mind always. But I have to follow the academic rules in my thesis. So my question I really would like to ask, how would I create an interest chapter-wise chapter in my PhD thesis, because I believe creative writing is an interesting comparatively academic writing.
So how do you keep the interest going in your thesis? And that of course is a slightly different thing, but it's creative, definitely creative to do that. Does anybody have a specific comment on that? I would say it's regarding a theme there. So don't put everything in the first paragraph. The first thing is you think this is going to be an excellent point or a good turn of phrase. Keep that for, say, partway down. Something of that nature. So that you don't put all your big guns in the first hit. Otherwise, it has a diminishing effect. You need to let it go down, back up. Oh, that's good, yes, and that will keep people interested. That's the way a book is, really, because you can't have people at 100% entertainment anxiety or anything that you're trying to invoke. You have to have lows and highs. That's a fairly rambling and ineffective response, I would admit. Does anybody have a yes?
Sorry, I was more or less just going to say that, which is just try and lead on to, or introduce what you're going to lead on to in the next paragraph, in the one before it. So, cover something off, but introduce the next topic, so that the reader has that kind of flow from one thing to the next. They have something that they're expecting or anticipating that will drive or pull them along.
When I heard this question, I went back to when I was writing my thesis and trying to think about how, because I remember being in those places where it just felt so difficult to spend another day writing and another day writing. But I think what really helped for me was finding the next thing that I was really interested to research, or the next bit that I really felt that kind of spark or passion about. And not necessarily writing in order from start to finish, but I would go and do pockets of it that were interesting me at the time, and then, take a break when I needed and come back and write another pocket. And then as the deadline approaches, you just end up doing more and more anyway, because you have to. But definitely at the start, just finding those bits where, that this is something I could really get my teeth into, and I've got that drive to write it. That was what helped me.
See, if I could just add, this is not specific, obviously, to thesis writing, and I actually hadn't realised that Ernest Hemingway was so popular still. He seemed to have been mentioned. He's the sort of additional person who's not here today. But one of the things that Hemingway always did was he ended his writing day when he knew what he was going to write next. So he knew what was going to come next. So the next morning, he had a start immediately, and I think that's probably quite useful advice.
Thank you, Steve. I suspect Hemingway isn't necessarily the be-all and end-all of how to write, but he did write down a lot of his thoughts, far more than some others did. I thank everyone for coming. We should wrap it up about now. I'd like to point out we have copies of the book here if anybody wants to buy some, and also you have people here who can sign them for you. In fact, I happen to know Ian was in Wolfstones and he signed about 150 books last Saturday before they caught him and threw him out. And if anyone has anything they'd like to ask of any of the groups, we'll still be here. So thank you all very much for coming, and I hope you enjoy the book. Okay.